Great. So to go? Good afternoon. We have with us this afternoon Mr. Carlos Del Sol, retired Vice President of Global Engineering for Campbell's Soup Company. Carlos, thank you for being here. What are the characteristics of a great leader?
First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here this afternoon to talk about one of my favorite subjects. First and foremost, a great leader must have the characteristics of honesty and integrity. Leadership is all about people, empowering people, valuing people, and caring about people. Great leaders recognize that they're only as good as the people that they work with. So they must form a team of strong individuals, and then they must develop them, help them develop both professionally and personally. The strong leaders also know the strengths and weaknesses of their organization. They enhance and build upon the strength, and they mitigate the weaknesses of the organization. Leaders establish a vision for the organization, where they want the organization, and then they empower their employees to get to that vision. They provide the tools and let them go. But they also need to be tough. They also need to establish challenging measurements and make sure that those measurements are met. Once they're met, then they need to celebrate their accomplishments. In many ways, they celebrate as an individual, recognize those individuals that perform well. They need to celebrate as an organization, as a team, but also there are other individuals behind the scene that need to be recognized. For example, one of the things that we did with my organization is once a year we had a dinner for spouses and significant others to bring them in and recognize them, because in many cases they sacrifice as much as the team member did. Our folks travel a lot, so they were away from home, so we recognize the other individuals that supported the team. A strong leader also must be able to be visible. They need to be approachable. For example, what I did in my case, I had the same office at Campbell Soup for almost 20 years. As I progressed up the company, I stayed in the same office. And the reason for that is I want to be close to the people. I want to have the pulse of the organization. I want people to be able to come to my office rather than being in a corner office, larger office. That didn't mean that much to me. To me, it was more important that I was close to the people that I work with. Great leaders also value diversity. And diversity in the broadest sense, because a great organization is one that has made up of a lot of different people. One of the things that I wrestle with, and most engineering organizations wrestle with, is, especially in the food industry, is that they were very senior organizations. So there's a need to have a balance and bring younger talent into the organization that are going to challenge the group. We're also very male-centric. So bringing in some women into the organization that also bring a different perspective. Millennials come from a different perspective. So that dynamic makes the organization much stronger, that whole diversity. The other thing is strong leaders support the community. They care about corporate social responsibility, so that's important as well. And the last piece, they're a continuous learner. You can't stop learning. So those are some of the thoughts as far as what makes a strong leader.
Terrific. What are the greatest challenges you have faced as a leader?
Probably the most challenging situations I was involved with was when there were tight budgets and we had to go through workforce reduction and adjustment. And that's challenging because you're affecting the lives of many people. And unfortunately in my career I had several situations where I had to do that, reduce the workforce. Obviously over beyond my, when the budget's cut and you have to cut resources, but the question is, how do you do that? How do you do it in such a way that's a fair way, that people understand what is it that you're doing, why are you doing it? Because it's not only the people that leave the organization are certainly affected, but the ones that stay behind are also affected very much. So it's how do you do it? You have to do it, again, going back to honesty, integrity, and communicating why you do that. Another area of, it's an interesting challenge for me. It was being head of an engineering organization in a non-technical company. And a lot of folks in the food industry don't know why do you need engineers. What does an engineer do in the food industry? So one of my roles, one of my responsibility is to show the value of engineering and what role we play. We're a true business partner in the organization. So as a leader of the organization, I had to show what we did. And we were highly respected within the Campbell Soup Company. But it took a long time to get there because that's not necessarily consumer goods company. Engineering is not necessarily the driving force.
How did your engineering education prepare you for leadership?
Very well. My industrial engineering degree gave me a very broad technical background, which allowed me to lead a technical organization made up of individuals with many engineering disciplines. I was not an expert in any one of them, but my industrial engineering gave me a broad perspective where I could go and work with the engineers, ask the tough questions, and know whether I was getting the facts or the fiction. The other dimension is because of the business background I received in industrial engineering, I was able to be a business partner and recognized as a business partner with the business community within the companies that I work with.
What other methods of leadership development were important to your growth as a leader?
Probably starting right out of college, I joined GE. It was called the Manufacturing Management Program. It was a 2-year rotational program with 2 assignments in one location and 2 assignments in a different location. So when I graduated from Florida, I went to the Philadelphia area while working for the switchgear business at GE. My second assignment on the program, it was my first supervisory assignment. I was supervising individuals who had started working with GE before I was even born. So here is a 23-year-old kid supervising individuals who were 40, 50 years old. And it was a challenging assignment because it was a strong union environment. So here I didn't have any leadership experience, but I had to lead these folks and show why it is that we needed to do what we had to do. My fourth assignment on the program, I was a third shift supervisor. And that was probably where I learned the most about people. At the beginning of the 6 months assignment, I was hiring people. By the end of the 6th month, I was laying them off because of cycle of business. But I learned the value of knowing people, caring about people. I knew every individual that worked for me. I knew a little bit about their family. I made sure that every night I saw them and talked to them. And they were not just my employee, but there's somebody that I work with. I probably spend more time with them than with my wife. And the other thing that happened in that job was that I terminated my first employee. And that was an experience that I always remember, and it goes back again to dealing with honesty and integrity. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do. If an employee, you lay out the facts and you follow the facts and you do it in a manner that is respectful, you have to do what you have to do. So, that's one of the first leadership position. Obviously, I took many training courses within GE and Campbell's. GE had a leadership institute in New York, which I attended. Campbell's had Campbell University. I also went to University of Chicago, University of Northwestern University, Kellogg's MBA school took the leadership development or the executive development program course there as well. The other area which was important to me is taking leadership positions outside of work. Some volunteering, being on board of directors for the United Way and Campbell Soup Foundation, give me a different perspective because when you're leading individuals that report to you, it's a little different when you're leading individuals that are, let's say, in a nonprofit. You know, if they work for you, you have an input on their appraisal and salary increase and so forth. When you're working with volunteers, it's a whole different world. So it was rewarding to be able to lead and provide direction to individuals in that direction. And the other is learning from other leaders. It's very important. It was very important to me to learn from others, watching them, see how they operate. I never tried to copy anyone, but I try to take the best of different individuals and the worst of other individuals and take that into mold myself as a leader. And you can learn as much as from a great leader as from someone who's not, because you can see there were times that I said to myself, Carlos, those are things that you will never do with your organization. So there's a value, and you cannot try to duplicate somebody. You got to be yourself, but you can pick and choose and mold yourself.
What advice would you give to students who want to become great leaders?
First of all, look for opportunities to get internship and co-op assignments where they can go out in industry and see how leaders operate. Just like I said before, try to meet individuals who are leaders of that organization. Interesting enough, I always used to tell young engineers or people coming into the organization, make it a point to schedule meetings with leaders in other parts of the organization. Outside of engineering, for example, talk to somebody in marketing, talk to somebody in finance, somebody in operation. If they're a true leader, they will find the time to meet with you. They'll find the time to communicate. Leaders want to leave legacies, and leaving legacies is leaving other leaders. So creating other leaders. So find the time and do that. While at school, become project manager and project leader, because as you lead other students, you're going to learn the art of leadership. Become leaders of student organizations or volunteer activities. That's another area of getting experience. There are a lot of books on leadership. I know probably most students at this time are not looking for another book to read, but they're great books that you can read very quickly. And there are seminars that you can go online about leadership. And last but not least, always display a caring attitude, regardless of what you're doing, because that's an important trait of a leader.
What can universities do to support leadership development?
Well, obviously, offer leadership courses. I think the Leadership Institute of the College of Engineering is a great example where students can learn about leadership. A second area is bring leaders to the university. Both, I know there's some classes where leaders come in. I've been asked to come in and speak to I think the Introduction to Industrial Engineering class. But there are opportunities to bring leaders so students can get exposure to them as well. And offer project management classes where students can operate in a project management leadership role and any other teamwork assignment. I think it provides that foundation for being a leader.
How has globalization impacted leadership?
That's a good question. Interesting, because in my almost 40 year of in industry, it has evolved. Working in a global environment, you have to understand how to operate in other culture, because different cultures operate differently, and to be a leader, you have to understand that. I made mistakes. I remember probably 30 plus years ago, we were meeting with some a Japanese company, and in this meeting, I came across pretty strong, asking pretty tough questions. And I learned that's not the way to operate. And there's a way to deal with the Japanese. There's a way that they sit in the room and so forth. So that's not the effective way. Being in a global organization and being the leader of a global engineering organization, I had to figure out how to deal with different cultures. There's some cultures where they don't want to show a weakness, and they feel embarrassed. So if you ask them to do something, they may not be able to do that, but they'll tell you they do that. And that's not what I'm looking for, because I want the success of the total team of the project. So I need to understand what their capability, but that's not their culture. So you have to make sure you understand when that happened. There are other cultures where they're not as demanding on schedule as we in the US are. So you got to understand that culture. So make sure when a date is given, is it doable? Are they going to make the date or not? There are other cultures, for example, where there's more of a command and lead role. I'll give you an example. Where I was working in Germany, and the team that I was there, they looked to the leader. So before they spoke, they looked to the leader to see, well, that's not what we're looking for. We want the input from the total team, but that's the way they operate. So how do you work in that environment to make sure that that leader understands that the value is the interchange of ideas across the total organization and the exchange. The other piece is obviously language, communicating in language. And language is more just than the language you speak, but even within the same language. I'll give you an example. About 20-some odd years ago, we're working in Argentina. We're building a new beef processing plant. And I was in the meeting, and I was presenting in Spanish. These were contractors, people from the team, and so forth. And I said something, and everybody looked at me with a funny face. I said, whoa, I don't know what I say. So after the meeting, the head of the operation said, Carlos, don't say that again in Argentina. That's not something that's very nice. And in my Cuban background, and I can't tell you, I don't remember what it was, but it was not something that was bad at all. So you have to understand the culture, and sometimes things like that do happen. So the other dimension, which is interesting, is how do you deal with a team, a global team? It's a 24-hour clock. So we had teams where we met on a regular basis, and there were times when we had a meeting in the afternoon in the U.S., but somebody in Australia was very early in the morning, somebody in Europe late at night. So it cannot be U.S.-centric. There are times when you have to respect the other countries and the other, so that you make teams and you revolve around. So sometimes we would have the meeting where we would have to get up real early in the morning. So so we rotate it. So again, it all deals with, again, respect, understanding the individual, understanding the culture, and how do you make, how do you get how you empower those individuals to perform at their best.
What key events or people were instrumental in putting you on the path to leadership?
Well, obviously I spoke about the supply chain, the manufacturing management program. Was very, very instrumental in setting the first step. I believe a career is like a pyramid, and you have to establish a solid foundation. And that leadership, the GE manufacturing management program set the first foundation. Right after, a year after I graduated from the program, this is when I had my first managerial assignment. I was basically at 25. And it was a stretch, and I learned a lot from that assignment. Shortly thereafter, I had a manager by the name of Dick Murphy. And Dick was one of these tough managers, old school managers. And he was head of manufacturing. I was manager of production operations. I would meet with Dick every day at 9:30 in the morning, and I would take a beating from Dick. I knew going in there that I would take a beating. The guy who was head of operations, the guy who was head of engineering would tell me, Carlos, the only thing that keeps me going is no matter how bad it is for me, it's going to be worse for you. And Dick Murphy would tell me, Carlos, you're a diamond in the rough. By the time I get through with you, you're going to be a shining gem. So he actually, I learned a lot from him. A lot of the values that I have today came from Dick Murphy. It wasn't necessarily fun, but he actually promoted me to the next level, significant level. And it's kind of a sad story because Dick died at the age of 53 while I was working for him. And long story, but we were at an event and he passed and died at the golf course at this event. So I met him. He came from, his family lived in the Boston area, and I met his son, and he said, Carlos, Dick used to talk to you about all the time. I never would have known that, but I learned that after Dick passed. The other individual who was a significant influence in my leadership style, and he came late in my career, was Doug Conan, who is the former CEO of the Campbell Soup Company. So for the past year at Campbell's, we worked under Doug. And Doug retired at the same time I did. But Doug is a leader who believed in empowerment of the people, employee engagement. The organization would be measured every year using the Gallup poll. And he actually, we had a leadership, the Campbell leadership model that everyone was measured by. And it was a sixth step in the leadership model. And it started with inspiring trust, which I spoke about, creating direction, which I spoke about, driving organizational alignment for the total team, building organization vitality, having the right team, having the right player, executing with excellence, and producing extraordinary result. So every employee in the Campbell Soup, regardless at what level, you were measured on this leadership model. And you know, it produced very good results from the Campbell Soup Company. And by us, for example, in the engineering organization, from the time that Doug came in to the time that I left, we were much stronger by following, you know, these rules of leadership over those 10 years. So again, Doug had a great influence on me. He's written books, and he's still he's lecturing now. But a great leader, a great individual who provided some real good thoughts on leadership.
Tremendous insights, Carlos. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.